introduction. That way you're going to know who he is, who the Chazon Ish is, and then we can get into faith and trust. Brand new stuff here. Okay, so we're on the beginning. Rabbi Avram Yeshaya Karlitz, who lived from 1878 till 1953, so he is fairly recent. Okay, was better known as the Chazon Ish, the title he gave to his writings. Ish being the acronym of Avram Yeshaya, right? If I take Aleph Yud, so it's Ish. That's where he's getting it from. So he was born in Lithuania and immigrated to the land of Israel in 1933, settling in Bnei Brak. For those who don't remember the name Bnei Brak, that is where the from people would be living, the village people would be living. While some of his wide-ranging halachic writings on Jewish law, were published while he was still living in Lithuania, he was largely unknown to the public before his immigration. Only after settling in Israel did he become one of the foremost leaders of the Haredi public, if not the foremost leader. In America, we had, as our leader in America, we had Moshe Feinstein. Everybody knows her as Moshe, that's how he's called. While the Chazon Ish was for the Haredi public in Eretz Israel. That's how it was. Okay. By the way, the Chazon Ish had many things that we still have to deal with today, namely how much wine we have to drink. His measurements of wine are usually more than everybody else's, and his measurements in general are larger than other people's. Sorry, that's a different question. But I'm just saying. But he's well known. I don't want to get into that.
He was nearsighted.
So again,
he was nearsighted.
He had his reasons. You would have to go through his rationales to find out why he held that. That, again, that's not the point of this class. I'm just saying that we all know him because of that. He becomes the most stringent when it comes to, like I said, how much wine one must drink, how much matzah one must eat, and what's the kazayat, what is the measure of kazayat as compared to what we would say. So he becomes much more stringent on that. His volumes in halacha span all of the Talmudic literature, and he created the basis for almost all discussions relating to regarding the mitzvot that relate to the land of Israel, namely Terumot, the Maishrot, what we have, the Eve offering, so on and so forth, the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, and the boundaries of the land. Also a very political situation. He did not care about politics. So understand something. When a rabbi of his caliber is speaking, even though it does impact on it could impact on the political scene, and he may have had to deal with that because of the monies if his yeshiva got any money from the government. Still, when he and others like him are giving decisions, that really is not on the forefront of their minds. Just as when until recently, I don't want to pick on this administration. When the Supreme Court would be adjudicating systems, while they always came down, it seems, according to party lines, if you would ask a legal a judge who was looking at the cases, they would tell you, and I have talked to people, they would tell you that their decisions make sense from where they were coming, and it makes sense in American law. So also, when the rabbis are looking at Jewish law, it may look like they're going with a political party, and it may very well influence their decision. I'm not going to say no, but they're really coming from a different perspective, and sometimes it just happens to fit that side. Okay, so like I said, I'm not going to say they're totally unaware of it. They had to be aware of it, but at the same time, they're not really adjudicating to kick out Arabs or to kick out Jews or whatever the case is going to be. Okay. Also influential, like I said, were his calculations as to the halachic measurements, namely about what a revius is, the quarter of a cup, a tefach, which is the measurement. What is a fist? Is a fist 3.5 inches? Is a 4 inches? Yeah, we have those arguments. and that impacts greatly on Jewish law. Okay? After the establishment of the State of Israel, he emerged as a spokesman in all public battles concerning the form it was to take. His nature, first and foremost, a halachist, expressing itself forcefully in this volume, comprising of 6 short chapters. One of them is left unfinished. All 6 deal with relationships between different concepts and between man and God and man. The first 2 are the most read and deal with faith and Hashem and trust in Him. And people will tell me that the first 2 chapters are the most difficult chapters. Of course, that means nothing to us because we only take on the challenges here. But it's very poetic Hebrew. Baruch Hashem, this translation is very nice, and we'll get into it. The writer's approach to these 2 major issues in Jewish life is startling in that he strips away much of what has been written on these 2 subjects and presents a totally fresh view of them. That's the translator's prejudice speaking. We'll decide if that's true. He goes on to deal with relationship between morality and halacha and the place of the study of morals, musar, in the Torah world. In the 5th chapter, he talks about the attitude towards progress and technology. The 6th chapter was to have delved into the matter of prophecy, but as he said before, it was never completed, and so we are only left with a tantalizing taste of what might have been. This was published after his death, and is unknown when exactly it was written. The ideas, though, are timeless. Now, the last part I won't read because it's only dealing with how he translated, so we don't have to go through that. Okay. Now let's go into the actual thing. Page 2. Talking about faith. Okay? He says faith, emunah, which, by the way, Hirsch translates as trust. And so that's many times. Emunah is a strange Hebrew word. It comes from the shoresh amen. And so when you say amen, you're saying I agree with what has just been said. So is it faith, as Hirsch points out, is something that is built upon nothing. I have faith that something will happen. But trust is because I have a record of behavior. So in other words, my parents gave me a trust in Hashem, so that's where I have this emunah that I believe it's going to be. Unlike the tooth fairy, which is only based upon, or Santa Claus, which is only based upon faith.
Oh, no.
Yes. I didn't say it doesn't exist. Faith is a refined tendency of the soul. If a person is sensitive and is in a state of equilibrium, free of any bodily desires, and in this calm state, he looks up to the sky in wonder, and down to the depths of the earth, he is moved and astounded. Again, what the Chazon Ish is saying is, take away all your prejudice, take away everything you know, sit down with an open mind, look up and look down. Okay? The world seems to him an impenetrable, wondrous mystery, one which engulfs his heart and his mind to the point that he almost loses his senses, and no breath of life is left in him. All he can think of is this mystery. He longs to know its solution. Who is he looking at as a model of this, by the way? Abraham Avinu. This is Abraham went through the sort of search. Okay, we're just searching right now. He would choose to go through fire and water for it. For what is life to him if these pleasures of life are an impenetrable mystery? He feels dazed, bereft, bewildered. He longs to unravel this mystery and get to its root, but the gates are locked. This refined person, who is deeply troubled, agonizes still further when he reflects upon various aspects of the world and sees enough to show him clearly that the world was built according to a calculated plan, as if an expert engineer made a blueprint of the world before it was created. Thus, he's getting into the Torah as a blueprint of the world, and because looking into it, as it were, as we were saying, Hebrew kapiyachol, as if to say, okay, Insurmountable obstacles presented themselves at every step, and the great energy of this engineer enabled him to remove them all. The blueprint of the human being is glorious and wonderful. The planner saw that man would not be able to wear the crown that was bestowed upon him as the jewel of the creation without detailed information about the contents of the world, from the inanimate to the flora to all objects of all kinds. Without this information, the machine known as man would have no life. So the planner considered this and invented an apparatus in everything in the world. Invented an apparatus in which everything in the world would make an impression by way of light, each object in its own particular way. Two such apparatuses were placed by him, by God, in man's face, one on the right and one on the left. We are in the habit of calling these apparatuses eyes, the right eye and the left eye. The wisdom expressed in the eye is endless. Throughout the generations, wise men have studied the eye in an attempt to understand the treasures of wisdom hidden in its creation, and they have yet to fathom it completely.
The eye is the window of the soul.
There you go. Very poetic. I used it many times in college. Okay.
Now you're being flippant.
No, I'm being honest. But it's what he is using, and is well known as the argument of design. Let's understand what he's doing. Okay, we all know the argument of design. The argument, in case we don't, so it goes like this: the argument of design says, just as this chair that we're sitting on had to have somebody make it because it's so orderly, just like this computer had to have somebody to manufacture it and to program it and so on and so forth. It didn't just pop out of thin air and work as well as it does. Even when it doesn't work well, it still works. Okay, but it's if that's the case, if something like that needs a creator, so certainly the world needs a creator. The argument of design. It's a very good argument. There are people who have argued against the argument of design. David Hume was one of them, and his claim, and this is for all the people who think that the Orthodox rabbis don't read the Wikipedia. Okay. So David Hume wants to argue that, and I thought it was very interesting. David Hume he's dead already. When did he live? He was a while ago, but
early 19th.
Yeah. So, but he and everybody who follows him. What I was amazed at, they all agree to one thing: that the argument of design is not so bad. It's a good argument. What they further argue is it doesn't prove there's a God. Or it doesn't prove monotheism. It doesn't prove that. It proves that possibly that somebody's out there. Now they also want to argue, later people would argue, that what we're seeing is such a small amount of information that what could be orderly to us may not really be orderly. That's what the other argument would be. Okay. The Chazon Ish, Rambam, Avigdor Miller, they're all different times. Okay, well, actually, Avigdor Miller was recent. They all use this argument of design. For all intents and purposes, even with all of what David Hume wants to say that it doesn't prove God does exist, God doesn't. By the way, I would agree with that. I agree with him. And the reason that God makes it so that there's always a question as to whether or not God exists is my free will. It's really what it is. I have to, as long as I can, like I always said about Pharaoh, as long as I can hang my hat on something that would prove that God doesn't exist, then I have the right, I have the opportunity to deny or accept. That's free will. If it's always in front of me that there's no way I could deny it, then I'm lost. Then I don't have free will anymore. So really that's what Hume and everybody else who wants to argue this doesn't bring that into, doesn't deal with that, the question of free will. They just want to say it proves or it doesn't prove. I really don't care.
He wasn't a theologian, was he? He was a philosopher.
Philosopher,
So then he wouldn't be dealing with
right.
that.
Like I said, when I saw this argument, I knew the argument design, and I really was looking for how they argued against it. And that's how they argue against it. I'm not here to argue for them. What I'm saying is that I hear their arguments, and what I always have a problem with is they don't take into account the religious spectrum of free will. And again, if it was that clear that there was a God, there could be no atheist in the world. And if there was so much proof that there is no God, there couldn't be a religious person in the world. If it was that clear, again, the tooth theory works when I'm 3 years old, 4 years old. But when I'm 5, 6, 7, it's basically over. Like Santa Claus, it's basically over. Superman doesn't work. Captain America doesn't work. It's a comic book. We all know that.
You're killing me here.
I know. Spider-Man doesn't work. Star Trek was only a show.
Oh, it's the harshest blow.
Harsh blow, okay. But I'm saying that we all know these things. And you don't have to be a brain surgeon to know that. By the way, I'll even give you one more. Pro wrestling. You'd have to be a moron to really believe that everything you're seeing is true. I'm not saying people don't get hurt, God forbid. Those wrestlers, God bless them. They really get hurt. They're good performers. But let's face it, it's a storyline.
All my heroes.
And all your heroes. Hulk Hogan, goodbye.
I think it's interesting that you brought in brain surgery.
Yeah.
And then wrestling.
Because for me, the strongest argument for design is being inside human bodies.
Right.
So it's always been my strongest proof that all of this was designed.
Yes, and that's part of the design. That's the point. That's what he's saying with the eye.
Right.
And if you watch MASH, there was a whole thing on when Hawkeye is having to stay up, but he talks about the thumb, the simple thumb. He goes crazy going on the thumb.
Boudica word.
What is it?
Manipulative thumb.
Right. So he's talking about how the thumb bounces everything to the small toe. It's amazing that what we have in our body. You're right. That if we just look at that, we know that there's design. And again, nobody's arguing design. What they're arguing is whether or not that proves God. Fine.
You can't have design without a designer.
And again, they would say, even if you're right, it doesn't mean that it proves that God is omniscient and benevolent, blah, 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 all these things. It doesn't prove that there's only one. It could be that there's a body of God. All it proves is that there's design. And that's only, again, if we're looking at a small microcosm of what we have. Is there some part in this, they can't argue one way or the other. They can only present it. Is there some part that is not orderly?
You couldn't have total chaos with design. They're mutually exclusive.
Again, I agree with you. But they would argue.
And you have to have a designer because nothing could design something so incredibly complex as a universe. From the greatest galaxy down to the tiniest subatom, everything works perfectly. Everything knows its place. Everything does what it's supposed to do. You can't have something on that magnitude unless there's an intelligence behind it.
That is the argument. But again, they would. I don't want to get stuck on this, but they would argue that we are only seeing a small part of that. We don't know everything. That they're right. We don't know everything.
No.
From what we've seen, it works in an orderly fashion. But does that mean that it's always working in an orderly fashion? That we don't. That they would argue. I'm not agreeing with them, but that they would argue since we don't have enough data, we cannot conclusively say that. Remember, they're dealing in the world of observation. When it comes to a world of observation, I can only go with what I see, which is why either climate change is the biggest fraud out there, or it's the greatest science out there, depending on what we see. And that's all it is. That's all science ever was. Observation. Psychology is observation. It's all observation. And we all know from magicians out there that what I see isn't necessarily what's true. Okay, but nobody wants to take that into account either for some reason. I don't know why. But again, that's where all I'm bringing out is for those who are watching this. Hopefully, we'll have 1,000 hits on this thing. But for those who are watching this, I want this clear that the belief, the trust of God, that is something we have to have. Either we have it or we don't. You can't convince me that God exists. You can't convince me God doesn't exist. That's only up to me or the individual who's hearing this, okay, or listening right now. But and so what he's saying to us, what the Chazon Ish is saying to us is, if you strip away all of your prejudice, just strip it away. Look at the world that you see, and ultimately come back to you. How you seeing the eye? How you see it with your eye. We can't explain the eye. We can't replicate the eye. Can we replicate it? We can now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We read the whole thing. How it works.
It's getting there very rapidly.
We didn't do it yet, though.
The building blocks are there.
We didn't do it yet.
Not 100%.
Okay, fine.
It's getting there.
Okay. When it gets to talk to me. But right now we're not there. Okay, and we're claiming to be here for over 65 million years in this world. Okay, humans probably a couple of million. Okay, and with all the scientific advances we have, with all the computer technology we have, that I will go like this. My hand it doesn't keep the speed, but it's a lousy speed. You tell me, okay? But it's the eye. It's not working like the eye. And more than that, I have yet to see anything that we created or formed or made that can heal itself. You cut a human hand, the human hand will heal itself. God's healing, but it'll heal. Okay? You break a bone, if you set it, even if you don't set it, by the way, it'll heal up wrongly. It'll heal up badly as well. But if you set it, it heals up on its own. Again, I always go back to this. When I got my flat tire, I took the thing out. It didn't magically seal itself and blow up.
Because you didn't have those tires. They do exist.
Okay.
Run flats.
I have to get those tires. Okay.
And self-sealing, self-inflating.
Okay.
You need a Humvee with the high-end
Everything
tires.
in the world is just a replica of some function of the human body.
Okay. But I'm just saying that we have yet to really manufacture those things. Yeah. And that's what he's saying. If you don't have any prejudice and you're willing to go outside and, as it were, look around using your God-given senses, you're going to recognize things. Okay? That's where he's coming from. What good is it if the eye can see, but this creation known as man is without the power of movement and is not able to move objects? The Creator noticed this as well, and he made man 2 arms, one left and one right, and a right arm, and a right one. Sorry. Each arm is segmented with many joints, each joint being able to turn for quick and easy use. At the end of each arm, he put separate sticks, 5 on each hand, we call fingers. These fingers were further given the sense of touch, enabling them to differentiate between heat and cold, dryness and wetness, hardness and softness, everything in keeping with what is necessary for the ordinary progression of life.
The most amazing thing.
Right. And of course, if I'm going to take the argument of that there is no creator, that is just all formed by itself, you have to now explain how we got to this stage and why everything didn't follow us, by the way. In other words, why did apes, for instance, why did some apes stay where they were, and why did some go to become Homo sapiens? Then, furthermore, why haven't we improved more? That's another question you have to ask too. Why haven't we seen continual? If we're improving, we should keep improving. Father, now, and I really don't know why we can't have gills and lungs. That would make so much more sense. That we could be
easier to clean your pool.
Absolutely. Okay.
Because
Yeah.
we're the Mark III model. Maybe the Mark IV will have the gills.
There you go. Well, no, you can't go backwards. We went from gills to come to air. We're not going to go backwards.
You can have that adaptation.
Okay. We'll see. Okay. So now, what good is human being if he has been granted eyes that see and hands that feel, but cannot move from his place? So the planner made 2 legs, perfectly and expertly formed, so that he can walk on the ground. Okay. And what good are arms and legs, and what good are eyes, arms, and legs, if they lie like dead bodies devoid of spirit? So he breathes life into man, the secret of which eludes us to the extreme. But we know, and all human beings know, that this spirit exists, and that it is due to it that we exist. We call it by different names: spirit, soul, or in Hebrew, nefesh, ruach, neshama. All these names are references to something we can only feel dimly, for we possess no knowledge of its essence. Spiritual. You can't show it. You can't see it under a microscope. You can't see it through a spectrogram. Is that what it's called? Spectrogram? Huh?
Good question. Some people claim to be able to see these things.
Who?
Not the spirit, not the neshama, they just see the aura.
Auras, yeah.
That's an energy field, that's not the spirit.
And I've watched people leaving bodies.
You've seen the spirit leave the body?
No, not a formed spirit, but you can tell when people are leaving.
You can see the body ebbing away. Yes.
You can see that moment if you're watching closely and carefully.
But you know,
because there is a moment.
Okay, but you're not. There's no way to quantify the spirit.
No.
Okay, and since there's no way to quantify the spirit, again, if I want to be an upper course about this, since there's no way to quantify the spirit, then the spirit does not exist, because I can't see it, I can't touch it, can't feel it, can't measure it. Okay, that's how it works. What we're saying, and again, if I'm in that sort of field, then I'm going to, as a good scientist, I have to say something I can't explain, something I cannot see, measure, or anything else does not exist as far as I'm concerned. Now, I think that's pretty close-minded when you look at that, but just because we can't measure something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But okay.
That ignores Clark's law. But
so again, what's Clark's law?
Clark's law, any sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic.
So what does that mean?
It means that flipping on a light switch would have been magic to somebody 1,000 years ago.
Okay.
They might have been able to understand it if you explained to them how it's happening, but it would take a while.
Mm-hmm.
Moving pictures, conversations across the world.
Right. So what does that do with the neshama?
Nothing. I'm just saying that Clark's law is saying that, just because you can't see it, quantify it, whatever, doesn't mean that at some point in the future.
There's a law like that? Okay. Great. I'm glad science is...
It's an extrapolation of Clark's law. There probably is a way to do that. We haven't found it.
Okay. If there's something like that, then I admire that. I was not aware of that. Okay, so here, but that's what he's saying. So now, what he's asking me to do, by the way, is accept that there is a neshama. Now, as Jews, I think that he's not really asking us, or as religious people, he's not asking us to go further than we really, it's not, we already accepted that. Okay. But nonetheless, he's putting that into the equation. In truth, there are many enthralling and wondrous parts in a person's body: the limbs, joints, the accommodation of the spirit of life within the material of the body, the makeup of flesh and bone, the circulation of blood in the arteries that enables life, and the blood itself, which is the life of man. How does he know that blood is the life of man? I'm asking you. How does he know that?
I don't recall the verse.
A verse in Torah, exactly.
Yeah,
the verse in Torah is just getting it from the Torah, which says that blood is the life of man.
Yeah, I don't recall where it is.
It's in Genesis.
I know the verse.
Okay.
Dracula thinks that too.
Baruch Hashem. He said that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So even after man was created, I shouldn't say he said it. Who wrote? There you go. Even after man was created, his existence is still not ensured, for his life is dependent on a regular supply of food to renew the body's blood. The Creator provided grain, wine, and oil, other plants, and countless types of fruit trees, each one of them incorporating different qualities that can provide nourishment to man, heal his body, nurture him, and enable him to live on this earth. Mankind has already managed to study the great wisdom and the structure of every plant of every kind, on which all of which bear witness to the Creator and to his endless wisdom. If anybody really wants to see a very nice extrapolation of what the Chazon Ish is saying, is I mentioned his name before, Victor Miller. I forget the name of the book already. But his philosophy, he wrote it as a question and answer between him and a young kid and an old man. And I can't remember the name of the book.
You have his books in there.
I have his book at home actually because I was reading it. But it's I can't remember the name of it. But he goes at length at this to say if you look at a simple leaf and you see it, how the leaf is formed and how the veins of the leaf and so on, so bring the chlorophyll, bring the water. It's an amazing thing. And he's asking us again to do what the Chazon Ish was saying. Look around. Can you really believe that all of this was a mistake or trial and error, which is a mistake, or accident, all works from mistake? Can you really believe that? Seeing how everything works? If you really want to hold by that, again, that's free will. God bless you. But it doesn't make sense. Just like I said, you would never agree that this, if I would come to you and say, I found this in the grass, and when I pressed that button that was blinking, it magically turned on. Actually, it wasn't even blinking because it wasn't plugged in. It also has a plug, so I don't know. What's the tether? But that's what they're asking us to believe. Okay? Life started from nothing, or primordial soup, but where'd that soup come from? From two atoms who smashed together and made everything. Well, I don't know. I don't know where the two atoms came from either. They have to go with Aristotle to say that the universe is eternal and there's no beginning, no end to that. Fine. But assuming that's the truth, so what happens when the two atoms hit and they create this? It sounds illogical. The odds are amazingly against it. Astronomical.
Was it the Ramban that did that thing with the ink?
That was Rambam. Maimonides did that. Yeah. And what happened was, we all know the story or not? Do we know the story? No? Okay. So the story is that there was a person coming into Maimonides, wanted to argue against God creating the world and God's existence and so on and so forth. So the story goes that the Rambam said to the person, do me a favor, I have to just take care of something. Just go out of the room for 2 minutes, and then I'll call you back in, and we can have a discussion. I have to finish up. Fine. So at that point, the Rambam pens a poem, with all the poetry that goes with it. Fine. And he calls the person back, and he says, "You'll never believe what happened. I spilled my ink spilled by accident, and it formed this poem." The guy looked at him and said, "What, are you crazy? Doesn't work that." He said, "Do you listen to yourself? If something as simple as this can't be formed by chance, how much more so the world?" Okay. Now there will be those who will tell you that if you get monkeys in the room who are hitting keys, that they indeed could make some of the classics up. Okay. The odds are tremendously against it, but again, if I want something to hang my hat on, I can find it.
The existence of the internet in its current state gives the lie to that theory. But
gives the lie to that theory?
Because somebody would have recreated the works of Shakespeare by now, randomly. A thought that occurred to me when you're talking about two atoms going together, it's as if you broke a rack of pool balls, and they magically came back together with the rack around them and maybe a pool table on top.
Oh, good.
We were just talking about Lashon Hara. The feathers would all come back in the bag by
Right, good, right, same sort of thing. If
the wind was blowing just right, and they all flew back in the
right,
bag.
right. Anything like that, just as that, the odds, the amazing amount of odds of that happening, actually it could never happen, because I picked up my, what do you call the triangle?
The rack.
The rack.
Yeah.
I picked up my rack and I put it down there. It's impossible to get back on the table. But let's assume for 1 second I left the rack on the table. Not going to pull together. I don't care. You could be Minnesota Fats, and you're not going to be able to pull that together. For those who remember Minnesota Fats, he's still alive. I am assuming he's dead at this point.
Yeah.
He was Jackie Gleason, I remember.
As a point of logic, that they're asking you to believe things that have never been seen by anyone.
Correct.
But to deny things that you see constantly, and everyone has had the same experience.
Mm-hmm. It's the whole fallacy.
It's the hypocrisy, and it's like the big lie that you don't believe in simple truths, but you believe in big lies.
Right.
Because you've heard it so many times.
Well, yeah. You don't want to believe that driving an airliner into a building and setting a huge fire with thousands of pounds of kerosene could bring a building down, but you are willing to believe that hundreds of people came together in this elaborate conspiracy that nobody has ever talked about and did this deliberately.
I believe that.
So, and atheists, they never see that it requires that same act of faith to believe that all of this happened randomly.
Yep.
It's exactly analogous that, I have faith that there's no God, but I also have faith that somehow out of nothing all of this happened.
It's like you're putting two different definitions to the word faith. That one that seems so logical, they deny, and something that seems so improbable, that's faith too.
Well, again, that faith is what I have no record of. That's the faith in the truth theory. Okay, that's the faith of the truth theory, where I have no record of really believing it, but except that maybe you gave me a little fantasy, or Superman or Spider-Man. Not to ruin your whole day again, but it's that's the fantasy that we all like, but you have to have faith in it. What's the old joke about Peter Pan? If you believe, Peter Pan exists. If you believe, then there's really peanut butter. But it's if you believe you can fly, as long as you have pixie dust. Okay, good luck to you. But that is what Peter Pan was predicated upon. This concept of belief. I have no reason to believe it. There's nothing to trust you on, but I believe it, so I believe it. Fine. When it comes to the faith in God, by the way, what you're picking on, again, they would argue on one thing you said. You said, how could it come from nothing? They would tell you there was pre-existing matter. There was eternal matter. And we don't know that. So, since it's eternal, there's no beginning, no end, which again is illogical when we're dealing with our closed universe, but logical only when I speak about a God who I know nothing about.
But that's Aristotelian, and you said that Rambam bases a lot of his thinking on Aristotle.
I never said Rambam. I said Rambam talked about it and showed you why Aristotle was wrong.
Okay, he was refuting.
He was refuting what was wrong. He liked how Aristotle got there, but he said he was wrong. Remember?
Because it's a major belief system
right.
of his age.
Right. So he was showing
saying that it isn't.
Saying that it doesn't work. Doesn't work. But this, he explained what that's what I'm saying. Whenever, I don't want to get into, this is not the class of Rambam, but everybody in my humble opinion, very humble opinion, I'm not saying that sarcastically. In my humble opinion, people misunderstand the Rambam. And they think that he was an Aristotelian in thought. No, he liked the methodology, but he never bought the hook, line, and sinker of it. He took what was good and threw the rest away, like we all do. Okay, I like something in the system. It works. I'll use that system. If it doesn't, but I don't have to buy everything. I just have to buy what works. As long as it doesn't contradict Torah, what do I care? 2 + 2 = 4. It works. Great. As long as I'm in base 10. If I'm in base 2, it doesn't work anymore. Okay? But that's what the Rambam was saying. He's saying, in your world, I'm speaking to you people. Remember, he's speaking to a small, select group who had studied and was confronted by Christianity's claims, Islamic, Muslim claims, philosophers' claims, and not knowing how to put it all together. So he was the first one to say, okay, not the first, but he was one of the people that was in that generation saying, let's look and see how we can
Parse it out.
Parse it out, good. Yeah, how we can place everything together so that you can go on with life. It wasn't for him. He wrote books for that. He didn't need to write this book. This was not for his. It wasn't him trying to work out the problem. Unlike other writers who, the best one was when bad things happen to good people, or when Kushner's book, where it was his catharsis to write that book. I feel bad that he lost his kid.
It led a lot of people astray.
Fine, but I felt bad that he lost his kid. But that was really his catharsis. He didn't bring any of the major thinkers there. It was let's just talk about this in a congregational manner. Okay, fine. It gave people some comfort. Some people turned away. Anybody who's turned away, they weren't really hooked into it that much anyway. But if it gave them comfort for the 5 seconds, that's going to give comfort. It doesn't. I'm not really going to pick on them for that. But what I'm saying is, Rambam wasn't doing that. He was already set with his philosophies, and he was just writing to that audience, saying, "This is how we can understand it." Even so much as to what we're talking about on Thursday night, God willing, the sacrificial or the reasons for the mitzvot. He's attempting to give rational reasons based upon where he's coming. Again, come Thursday night, I'll listen here for people online. Friday, you'll hear that whole, I don't want to keep that sharing online. You have to come to the class. Okay, but it's, sorry. Yeah. I'm just saying, but he wasn't Aristotelian. I don't think he was. Now, I have to admit, I'm also alone in that. Most people say he's Aristotelian. But from what I'm seeing, he's not. So that's my humble opinion.
Yeah, right from the first pages.
Right.
You know, ex nihilo.
Yeah.
You go right in those first 60 pages.
Mm-hmm. So I'm saying, I don't know why people want to keep saying he is, but maybe one day they'll explain it to me. I'll have to watch their class online.
One of the words you like, the Weltgeist.
Yeah.
I think he was using the logic and the Aristotelian.
He was. You know, like I said, he liked it.
Epistemology, the theory of knowledge. How do you arrive at the truth? He was using those syllogisms against much of.
Right. Again, he liked what he was. He liked the methodology. He rejected the end. That's what he liked. So now let's go on. Further, we see a light that is close enough. Further, we see a sight that is enough to rouse the heart of any wise person. The internal structure of the human body enables it to accept food, digest it, break it down chemically into separate components, and to send each component to its proper place. Think about it. As you said, when you open up the body and see how everything is working, it's unbelievable. Okay? By the way of wisdom that human beings have been granted, we have learned the workings of the abdomen and the stomach, the liver and the gallbladder, the spleen and the kidneys, the intestines and the bladder, the heart and the brain. Each organ has its specific functions, and they all work in marvelous coordination to sustain the proper blood composition. namely the right amount of red and white blood cells necessary to the continued existence of the machine called the human being. The blood sugar level is also regulated, as are all other components that must be in exact relationships and quantities. Human beings are generally oblivious of the host of forces that are standing guard and work tirelessly and continuously to sustain their lives. In other words, our immune system. Okay? One of the joys of wisdom is to contemplate the connection between life and air, its elements being oxygen and carbon dioxide. The agent acting between the human being and the air is the seven-lobed lung, which was given the ability to breathe the oxygen into the body, so that the living body, the blood, the flesh, the bones, and the sinews can be maintained. The lung is one of the body's main soldiers in the battle for life. And we'll have to